Hi everyone, welcome to part 2 on my two-part series of using the Pegasus Astro Falcon Rotator and my setup with my Skywatcher Esprit. Now in this video I'm going to really concentrate on how I'm using it in my imaging sessions in Nina, pointing out how you can perfectly orientate an object into your field of view to sort of maximize your results. Also, the advantages of if you're doing a collaboration, for example, how you can perfectly match somebody else's orientation, so you're not having to crop out a lot of stuff that you've captured because everything doesn't line up quite right with the other person. There's also a bit of an advantage with when it comes to doing mosaics, which I'll talk about later on in the video. So let's get started. Right, okay, so we're now in Nina, and so I've tried to look at a target that is sort of easy to see when oriented. So I've done the framing wizard here, and I've gone to the Statue of Liberty Nebula. That way you can sort of see, which way is up and etc. Now, I'd really want it to be sort of more in perhaps that orientation like that. Now, if I just go and do slew and center, if I didn't know the orientation of my camera, I could just go slew and center, and so we'll set it off on its way there, and I'll speed this up for you. Okay, so it's just taking an image here now that it's and it's going to plate solve it and sort of make sure it's in the right position. Okay, so we can see it here. I'm not sure, it says it's solving, and it's not inside tolerance, so it's going to adjust. Okay, so it's happy with how it is, although it's not ideal for the orientation I want. I've got it over here, so we've got a framing. We've sort of got it more straight across here. Over on this one, on the image, it's on a little bit of an angle like this. So what I want to do is I want to tell Nina that I want to go to that target, and I want to rotate the telescope so it matches this orientation completely. So instead of just slew and center, I go over to slew, center and rotate. Now it's not going to move very far because it's on the target, but what it should do is take an image, realize that it needs to rotate, and then we should see on this area here say that it is rotating once it has plate solved. It solved it, and now it says rotating. So now the camera is going to rotate. I do have it off here somewhere. I should be able to watch it actually rotating, and I'll hopefully have that recorded so you can actually see it rotating. And it seems to have stopped there, and it's exposing now. Just bring this in here. It's not going to stay in there, sorry. But I'll get a recording from it and I'll put it in. And now we've got a much better orientation. It's just solving, it's slowing again, it's just getting itself into the perfect position. It takes a few more. Normally when you slew and center, it takes a couple of goes. I found that with slew, center and rotate, it can take 3 or 4 goes, because it's obviously got to adjust itself not only for centering it where you want it, but also for the right rotation. Okay, and it seems happy with that. And now, although this is obviously sort of upside down, it's like with a meridian flip. If I just compare it, we've got it nicely positioned, evenly across here horizontally, which matches this, but just in a flipped orientation. Now, of course, if I've gone to this target, for example, and started imaging, but I've also been imaging another target with a different orientation, this is where the rotator really comes into its own, because it means that you can go back to that target and match that orientation exactly. None of this trying to, if your telescope has a manual rotation with markings on it, so you can actually adjust it yourself, that's fine, but it's quite a problem on the Skywatcher. You can do it, but it takes a lot of time mucking around trying to get it, and even then you don't really get it completely accurate. So I'm just going to go here to File. Now I was doing a target, and that was, where are we? This is my weekend at Bernes. So I'm going to go to a luminance and just open that up, and I'll just speed this up. It's got to download it, sorry, it's offline. Okay, so it's loading and it says it wants to plate solve it, so I'll say yes, plate solve. It'll work out where it is and then it'll actually fire the whole image in here, and we'll just make it smaller. Now, it's hard to see in a luminance. This is a dark nebula, and dark nebula always look pretty disappointing in a single image. I mean, what it really looks like is an absence of stars. Anything else is not that nice structure that you see in your HA. So yeah, you've got to get used to that when you're doing dark nebula. There are some reflection nebula areas here and here that do show up. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to switch over here to the hips to fits sky survey. I'm just going to expand this out a little bit and put load image, and then you get a better idea of how that image is oriented. Okay, so it's loaded up the image here, and you can see the dark nebula here and the reflection nebula in there, but obviously the orientation of the camera is quite different to the way it was that I've just gone to with the Statue of Liberty nebula, where the orientation is this way. Now if this was a new sequence, I would go to add target to sequence, and then these sort of templates that Patriot Astro has provided. He's included different versions, some where there's offsets for your focuser and ones with rotate. Now what I'd choose here, I'm doing a mono LRGB and rotate, and that way it will include the instruction of slew, center and rotate. So I'm going to click on that and it says it's been created. And now if we go to the sequence, so I'm just going to throw that in if it was going into the top here. And if we come down here, and we'll get rid of these instructions because they do get in the way a little bit. You'll see down here there is this option that is here, slew, center and rotate. If I go back to the imaging tab here, and we'll just hit start sequence, and it will now head off to Berens 142, if that's how you pronounce it. Didn't go very far. So it's just exposing, it's solving, and now it's going to rotate because obviously it needs to match the orientation I was doing the previous night. So the rotator will now be moving, I hope. So just like that, there we go. I'm just going to stop that now. And so this is how the orientation that I'm back to the orientation that I had when I was doing my previous imaging session. So you know, that's a quick rundown on some of the things that you can do. Oh, there's one other thing I should point out too, and that is with doing a mosaic. So say we're doing a 2x2 mosaic. Now, one thing I've noticed when I've been doing these mosaics, even though it looks like they are perfectly lined up and that there'll be, you know, you have your 20% overlap and that, you know, you'll be able to get a nice rectangle like this as a final image, I have found that it actually doesn't line up that well, and you'll get this panel sort of coming out, will be overlap, sort of sticking out to here, and this panel will be sticking out over here, and you end up losing quite a bit. You have to sort of crop it. And if you look at this here, it says having this option, this is preserve alignment, having this option enabled will ensure that panels align to a single rectangle but result in different rotation angles for each panel. So if you've got a rotator, you can put that on and then it'll make sure that actually everything lines up perfectly and you don't have a lot of that sort of wasted image of each panel that you have to get rid of because they haven't really quite aligned properly. So another nice advantage of having a rotator when you're doing that. But anyway, look, that'll do it for how I'm using it in Nina. And just to finish, I'll show you the result of my weekend at Bernes 142. Just one other thing I wanted to mention before I show you the image. If you remember in the first video, I was talking about this park button. When you put your little cursor on the question mark, it talked about it moving the focuser to the 0 position. Well, I sent an email to Pegasus Astro and said, hey, what's the story? Is this a typo or do you mean focuser? And they came back and said, oh, no, that is a mistake. Thanks for pointing that out. And they will change it from focuser to rotator and correct it in the next version of the software. So look, I hope that's been useful about maybe helping you decide whether it's worth getting something like the Falcon Rotator or one of the other rotators on the market. I didn't really want to just sort of hold up a rotator and talk about it and then run through aspects of the software without actually demonstrating how it can be used. So as I said, that's why I've made it a two-parter, try and not make it drag out too long. Probably still is, but anyway, at least there's a bit of a more practical side of using the rotator and how it can sort of make your workflow a bit easier, particularly if you're moving between targets and changing rotation of your camera, or want to just really get the perfect rotation to really fit that nebula nicely into your field of view. Now, when it comes, I talked about my weekend at Bernes, and my apologies to the Swedish astronomer whose name is, I presume it's Bernes, B-E-R-N-E-S, and had a catalogue of these dark nebula. But I processed this over a weekend, and seeing the name, couldn't resist calling it a weekend at Bernes. So the one thing about dark nebula, I find them quite hard to process. I don't know about the rest of you, but you know, I'm still working through you know, sort of making my processing better, getting a better result each time. When your subs are first coming in, it can kind of be a bit disheartening. Now, for comparison, like here's the rosette. Now here is a single 5-minute sub, and you know, you look at that, it's an HA, and you see the detail, you see all the little structures in here, and it's like that wow factor, very exciting when it comes in. And you know that as you stack more and more of these, you're going to get a really nice image at the end of it. On the other hand, you bring in your first, say, red filter, which is a 3-minute sub, and it's kind of, as I said, disheartening. The nebulosity just really looks like a lack of stars on your sensor. You know, there's a hint of this sort of reflection nebula here and here, but otherwise, you know, it's very easy to look at this and go, oh, there's no point in doing this, it's a waste of time. But you know, as with all astrophotography, the more images you take, the more you stack, then once you get your stacked image, you start to see more and more structure. And you start to get a bit more of an idea of, hey, actually maybe I can get something out of here. Maybe it's just not an absence of stars. And I'm refining my technique and trying to get better at it. It's still a work in progress, but this is basically sort of more of a close-up view of well, Berens probably 142, and perhaps in a lower field of view, or wider field of view, should I say, with a bit more sort of dark space around it, you could see it a bit more defined. But I quite liked it. I really like the dust in these dark nebula. They just seem really sort of like looking at the really raw building products of stars and planets, and you know, and everything. So there's a little galaxy hiding over in the corner there. So anyway, yeah, as I said, hope you found the video useful, and I wish everybody clear skies, and I'll leave you with my image of my weekend at Bernes 142.